Welcome into the lounge presented by DraftKings. We have the pleasure of sitting down with General Manager Eric DeCosta to break down the 2024 NFL Draft. So, Eric, we know how much you loved all the Ravens picks because you didn't make any trades. So you had to love the player. First time as GM that you didn't trade back at all in the draft or trade back into the draft. So we heard from David Blackburn and we heard from Harbs. They kind of answered the question for you, whether that bothered you. But I want to ask you the question, let you speak for yourself. How much did not making a trade bother you during the draft?
You know, I'm trying to make the team better, right? And so there's a lot of different ways to do that. Some years you make trades. For me, it always depends on who's available, who might be available, what can we get from making a trade, and is it worth, moving away from a really good player. And this year, looking at the board, it was like, nah, these guys are really good football players. They make us better from day one. Yeah. Let's just make our picks.
Yeah. But I feel like, it's kind of like when I see a discount somewhere, if I don't buy the discounted thing, I kind of get this itch. It kind of just gives me the heebie-jeebies. You don't get that feeling though.
A long time ago when, I was a young aspiring scout and I was trying to decorate my small apartment on Light Street, which was down there in Fed Hill, right over there by Sam's Bagels, which I don't even know if it exists anymore.
I think it still does.
Yeah, Sam's Bagels. I was across the street, and I bought the cheapest furniture.
Yes.
And, I saved a lot of money. It was garbage, and it was literally falling apart. First of all, I had to put it together.
Right.
But then once I put it together, it started falling apart. And I thought, you know what? Next time, I'm going to go to Chauffeurs, which was a big furniture store across the street, and actually pay for good furniture. I think this year we paid for good furniture.
Okay. All right.
That's a good way of doing it.
These aren't IKEA prospects.
Yeah. The only person who I think may like trades more than you is Steve. You told us about the Bisciotti Reign of Terror idea during the pre-draft press conference. So was he over there saying, no trades? We know that he loves to make trades. Like I said, maybe even more than you.
Yeah, he always wants to make trades. He's always pushing me to make trades, and he's staring at me. But I'm confident in the work that I do, and I'm confident in my evaluations, and I'm confident in my ability to assess the market and assess the draft board. And so ultimately, it's my call. And if I decide not to make a trade, I'm going to look at Steve and say, we're picking.
Yeah.
Nice.
Well, you obviously picked at number 30. You get Nate Wiggins, and that's an exciting time for this team. Mm-hmm. When that pick is made, did you feel when going into that day? Did you feel like corner is going to be the spot, and Nate Wiggins could be that guy?
I did. I thought there was definitely a chance. So I obviously it was a historic offensive line draft, and you saw the 8 offensive linemen, I think, maybe 8, go before we picked. And I kind of felt that to be the case before the draft. And looking at it realistically, I thought we might have a chance to get a corner or a receiver, wide receiver in the first. And in looking at the corner board, I felt like there was a good chance that Mitchell would be gone. I thought the Arnold would be gone from Alabama. Those 2 guys for sure. And then I'm looking at it going, okay, is there a chance that we have a chance to get DeJean or Wiggins? That'd be great. We had the chance to get both guys, and Wiggins is an extremely talented player, phenomenal athlete, just a straight lockdown cover type guy. He's a little thinner. I think sometimes people confuse his lack of frame with a lack of toughness or aggression, which we don't subscribe to that theory, because we see a physical, competitive player at times with a good motor, highly competitive. He does need to get stronger. He will get stronger. He can do that. We thought he was the best cover guy in the draft, quite honestly, with the best feet, played against phenomenal competition, which is very, very important in evaluating that position. And we think he fits who we are as an organization and our defense quite well.
You said that Derek Yam gave it an 80% chance that Roger Rosengarten would get to you in the second round. Can you share what the percent chances were of Wiggins getting to you in the first?
Yeah, I think Wiggins was closer to 40%. Wow. I think. The issue for us really was going to be that if we were able to get an offensive lineman in the first round, we saw a very small chance that we would get an offensive that we would get a corner in the second round. We thought there was a better chance for us to get the offensive lineman in the second round by getting the corner in the first round. Just looking at the way we could operate the board based on the percentages of those players being there. So Derek does a great job with our draft board, taking the grade of the model, taking the grade where the player is on the draft board, taking the consensus board, the industry standard, so to speak, and for each round, at each pick, creating a percentage that we might expect that player is going to be there. I think it's pretty good. We have to go back now and sort of go back and look at the percentages and see how accurate those percentages were. I will tell you that our experiences, at least with the players that we got, seem to be pretty spot on.
Right.
But I haven't gone back and really checked that list, the totality of the list against the percentage to see exactly if it worked out.
Well, and the corner tackle strategy seemed to make sense on the surface, even because so many teams took their tackle or their offensitive lineman in round one that the needs in the second round, there just weren't as many teams with that need.
That's right. So if and that's excellent, and that's what I thought about too, Ryan. I actually applaud you for thinking about it like that, because that's going into it. I'm like, okay, 8 teams have drafted a tackle.
Right.
These teams have signed tackles in free agency. These teams have good starting tackles. How many teams are going to actually potentially draft a tackle? And what we saw was that our biggest threats were going to be the teams behind us in the second round. San Francisco and Kansas City. Those were the teams that really kind of gave me some concern.
That they would leapfrog potentially.
That they would be in the tackle market, definitely. And there were obviously some teams in front of us, but we felt like the number of tackles taken in the second round would be much lower than the amount of tackles taken in the first round.
Right. You kind of gave a little bit of an indication there, talking about Cooper DeJean, that he was another player high on your board. During the draft, you said if Nate wasn't there, there's one other guy that we would have taken, or we would have probably traded back. Was that Cooper, or can you give us any other clues about who that player would have been?
Yeah, without my list, I think I don't remember.
It's been so long.
If I didn't remember when I said it, after the draft, I'm probably not going to remember now because it's been a few days.
Your memory's kind of foggy.
Yeah, well, it was foggy the other day, and it's more foggy now.
Gotcha.
I'm curious about you just talked about how you could have possibly gone receiver in the first round, and then after we picked, there was kind of this run on receivers that went into the second round even, What was, kind of walk me through that process of looking at the receivers, considering potentially a receiver there, and that run that ends up taking place basically right after that we picked.
Well, it's funny. I was thinking about that, because someone said, how do you define this draft? And I said, well, it was the draft of the runs. And I was like, maybe I shouldn't have said it like that. But there were a lot of runs this year. And we were at the front, I think, of a lot of these different movements with positions, which was fortunate. We saw it in different ways. We saw it with corners, in that span of the draft too, where all the corners got picked pretty much from the mid part of the 20s all the way down into the early 40s. Most of the corners got picked. There was a receiver run. There was a historic run on offensive linemen at the end of the second into the third, where we saw all those tackles and guards, like basically the entire guard board just got wiped out. You did see the receivers. That was a good group of receivers. I think what hurt that position in the draft was, quite honestly, just the amount of offensive linemen and quarterbacks that went in the first round. You probably saw 14 maybe quarterbacks and offensive linemen go in the first round, and by that happening, you see like corners and you see receivers, prize positions, good value in the mid-20s in the early part of the second round as well at those positions. So
one of the receivers who got drafted in the first round was Xavier Worthy, speedster. Obviously, he goes at 28, right in front of us. To the Chiefs, they trade up and get him. I'm curious. Like the Chiefs take him, then 2 picks later, you end up taking a super fast cover corner. Does a move of another team impact what you do? Like, does the Chiefs drafting Xavier Worthy ever have, or did it have any impact on your decision to take Nate Wiggins?
Not really. It's just, it's nice. It's nice when your strengths kind of align with another team's strengths, so you match up well, especially a competitor. But you're not going to just draft players generally based on one other team's moves that they've made. It helps for sure. We would have taken Wiggins had the Chiefs drafted a tackle.
Okay, yeah.
We would have drafted him. Now Worthy's a heck of a player, explosive guy, a guy that I liked a lot as a prospect, and I think looking at him, he's a little bit like a Zay, Hollywood Brown, that type of guy. We have a Zay. So for us, I think, and we can kind of segue, to Tez, but we were looking for a different body type this year. We were looking for an outside, big body guy. And so, I subscribe to the theory. It's like a restaurant. You go to a restaurant, you want a lot of different things in the menu. You don't want all the same thing on the menu. And I think at the receiver position, it is smart to have different types of receivers. I want excellent receivers, but I also want guys that can play X, Z, whatever it might be. You want guys to have different skill sets. Some guys play outside, vertical guys. Other guys can do both. Some guys are slots. They can find the open spots inside and make the plays inside. You want guys that can catch the ball, have secure hands inside. Outside, you want fast guys that can jump and leap and make highlight contested catches and different things like that. So you don't want them all to look the same, I think.
Yeah.
So in Worthy's case, outstanding player, love his game, love his speed, love his return ability, excellent pick. Hate to see him go there, but for us, getting Wiggins was a home run.
Now, you look back at the Ravens draft history at cornerback, there's Chris McAllister, Jimmy Smith, Marlon Humphrey. These are kind of bigger guys, press corners that Baltimore is kind of, I feel like, become known for picking right in the first round. Nate Wiggins is built a little bit differently, but do you think that he's more built and kind of better suited for today's NFL game?
Well, I mean, Nate's actually, he's got good length. He's a tall guy. Can he fill out? Yes, he can fill out. We'll get Manny cooking some omelets for him, and I think we'll be good.
I told Nate that if he wants a mentor, a role model in the filling out game, I got him covered.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've seen how long employees stay in the cafeteria at lunchtime. So there's definitely a focus on eating here and quality food.
100%.
Are you looking at two chief offenders here?
Well, I'm not making any comments or any judgments on anybody. But I think, listen, Nate has good length. He can press. He can play from off. I see him as being able to play every coverage that we want, every technique that we want. He's going to get bigger and stronger. He's going to be a player for us that we can count on for a long time.
So in the second round, you go offensive tackle, and you go with Roger Rosengarten there. And I got the sense, and hearing from you guys after the draft, like he was your guy. He was the one that you wanted going into the second day. Is that how you looked at it? Like basically, fingers crossed, Roger Rosengarten is there for us in the second round.
Well, we wanted a tackle for sure, and there were very few tackles left, and we had him as the best guy for us. I mean, there were some other players that we liked, some other tackles that we liked, but Roger for us was the cleanest player in different ways. Younger guy, excellent feet, outstanding athlete, great mover, durable, has played on the right side. He's a natural left tackle who was moved to the right side to protect Penix's blind side. So if you get the left tackle experience with him, he's never given up a sack. Again, another guy, he's going to get stronger and more physical. He can gain some size and muscle, and I think he will. But when we look at tackles and we look at the production and we look at the body type and the mentality and the intelligence, his pedigree, his level of play, and what he did, we saw him at the Senior Bowl. He had a great week down there. When we look at all that, he was clearly the number one guy for us at that position, for sure.
Body type, was there any? Is that part of what Todd Monken wants from an offensive lineman? It seems like his ability to move and be out in space, and it seems like he has that ability.
Add more mobility at tackle.
Was that part of it?
Got mobility. Listen, we'd like our tackles to be as athletic and big as possible, and he's a very, very athletic guy. I think his frame is going to continue to fill out. But he can play in space. He can pull. He can block at the second level. He can protect the edge as a pass protector. He can change direction. I mean, he does everything pretty well. He's a great kid. He's very smart. He's highly motivated. He's been durable. So looking at him, he's a very safe, clean pick for us. There were some other guys we liked as well in the second round, but we were ecstatic to get him. And I can tell you that going into the second day, he was right at the top of my list.
So after Patrick Paul and Blake Fisher went, were you starting to sweat then at that point?
I was a little bit, and I'll be honest, when we had Roger over those two guys. Those guys were good players, though.
Yeah.
And definitely viable options for us at some point. And we liked both those guys in different ways. We had Roger over those two, but when they got picked, it was definitely, I was sweating. Not necessarily that he might not make it down close to us, but that other teams behind us who knew we needed to tackle might try to jump us to take him.
Yeah, so you kind of alluded to this, that there was a team calling the Chiefs who were interested in moving up to our spot.
Yeah.
And then they decided not to. Was that just because you asked for too much and ultimately they were like,
It was a weird deal. And I think we were very fortunate how it all went down because, so we were picking at 62?
Right.
And I think at 63 was the 49ers, and at 64 was the Chiefs.
Right.
The Chiefs called us and offered us to go back 2 spots. I think a 5th-round pick and maybe a 7th-round pick. I forget. I know the 5th was involved, which for 2 spots is like you'd think pretty good, right? 3 players. So we debated doing that. And then when we called them back, and I said, yeah, I'd probably do that. We called them back, and they said, no, we're not interested. So then...
And they were the ones that originally pitched it.
They did. And so then we picked Roger. And then they then traded up with San Francisco, 1 spot.
Right.
And they drafted Suamataya, I think, from BYU.
Yeah.
So... we're sort of under the impression, you never know 100%, but we had some people tell us that this was the case, that both teams, the 49ers and the Chiefs, both wanted Rosengarten. And so when Rosengarten got picked, the Chiefs traded with San Francisco to get the next tackle, which was Suamataya. San Francisco, I would assume, was happy then, since Rosengarten was picked, to go back, get a little bit extra.
Right. They took
and
a
allow
corner,
the Chiefs to take who they wanted. So you never know. I mean, we were told that by somebody close to Rosengarten in the agent community that was the case. But I can't say that, the Chiefs did want to trade up and then backed away from that. From the Chiefs' perspective, maybe they're saying, well, there's a good chance we'll get Rosengarten. It's 2 picks away, so let's just wait. And I don't know the answer. I would have been very angry, though, I can tell you, had we traded with the Chiefs and they had taken Rosengarten, I would have been in a dark place. So even though we would have gotten additional picks, my idea was to go back 2 spots and still get Rosengarten, which we do a lot. We go back and get the guy we want, which is a beautiful trade when that happens. In this case, though, had we gone back, I'm not sure we would have gotten him. It would have been tough.
So the Chiefs basically were thinking that maybe we were going to take Kingsley. So they were like, you know what? Never mind. You were going to take Kingsley. We're still going to get our guy Rosengarten.
Yeah.
So that's interesting.
It must have read your mock.
Well, there was a lot. I mean, there was a lot of buzz between us and Kingsley. So maybe maybe I helped us out.
Yeah.
My mock that had Kingsley.
You can tell yourself what you want.
That's great. So then as you one more question on Rosengarten, that right tackle, left tackle possibility, like you think that he potentially could play left tackle as well, and if you end up getting a left tackle late in the 2nd round, I mean, that would be a crazy steal.
It's kind of the bonus too, because, the immediate need for us is at right tackle, which he just played at Washington. So he can come in. So the movements are all the same, but he also has the skills of protecting a blind side if we need that down the road. Is that kind of how you saw it?
Yeah, I mean, when we first looked at him, we looked at him as a right tackle. He went to the Senior Bowl. He played some left tackle with, I would say like some good, some bad, but he hadn't really played that position for a couple of years. And so I just see a guy that's like big and athletic and smart, and he's played some left tackles. So I think it gives us great flexibility. One of the things we look for with offensive linemen when we evaluate offensive linemen is one of the position specifics is versatility and just having the ability to play multiple positions. And that's a valuable thing on the offensive line. We've seen a guy like Pat McCary who can play all the spots, on the offensive line. Those guys are invaluable for your club, especially on game day. So if you have a tackle that can play left tackle or right tackle, it just increases, your depth on the offensive line when you're trying to play a game.
Right. So, like you said, in the 3rd round, guards, offensive linemen, guards and tackles, it just was a crazy run. I think it was 10 were picked in the third round alone before we came back on the board. Were you looking at the third round as possibly, hey, we might double up on the offensive line as part of this rebuild? And did you just kind of have to pivot after they just came flying off?
Yeah, I mean, we did. We looked at that. And so in the third round, yeah, they all came off. Would we have taken an offensive lineman? We probably would have. Now we took Adisa, and he was pretty highly rated on our board as a player and as a person. So it was a really, really good pick for us. I think I'm really happy with that pick. We also looked at, quite honestly, we looked at, TJ Tampa, because we had him pretty high on the board as well, and we had already taken a corner. So we was kind of a wait and see, and we decided not to take a corner at that point. We discussed it. We just figured, like, at this point, we've just drafted a corner, so let's just not, even though he's worthy of being picked there, let's wait. But the reality is that all those linemen got picked right there after Rosengarten. It was just a massive run. And we felt like Adisa was just the best player, critical position. I think one of the things that made me feel really good was we had drafted a corner, a tackle, and a pass rusher, three of the most important positions that we had been able to fill those really critical, important positions on our team with our first three picks was a good thing.
Adisa is interesting because, he goes obviously to Penn State. Chop Robinson goes in the first round, and those two guys are both coming off the edge at Penn State. Adisa had more production at Penn State than Chop Robinson had, who was a first rounder. Now Chop has some kind of off the charts athletic ability, but when if Adisa runs a 4.48 at the combine, maybe he ends up being, a guy who goes first or second round. Yeah. But how do you kind of look at that potential versus production? And, you end up getting the guy who had more production, which is ultimately what you're looking for, at the same position in the third round. It seems like great value there.
Yeah, we felt like it was. My daughter's at Penn State. I was up there a few times this fall. Kenny Sanders, who used to work with us.
Kenny.
Director of player personnel up there. I've got a great relationship with Coach Franklin and his people. I was at the West Virginia game and watched those guys play. And we just felt like Adisa really fits our mentality, who we are as a team. We've had a lot of success with guys like him. He's a relentless football player. He's got an amazing story of resilience and just achieving and, dealing with adversity and various things, and has really performed so well. And like I said, he's the type of guy we really kind of seek when we build our team. He checks every single box, and I've got no doubt in my mind he's going to be a productive player for us.
It's interesting. He's got a connection with Odafe Owe. You have some connections in this pass rusher room. Ajabo and Owe went to high school together. They're great friends. Odafe was Adisa's host when he visited at Penn State. I don't know if that...
Sanusi Kane was a high school team.
Yeah, high school. Odafe Owe, very happy man this draft.
And Ajabo.
And of course
Ajabo. At Blair Academy.
Exactly.
But was that kind of the cherry on top that they have a connection, or does that play into anything at all when you're making picks?
Well, I mean, it's a nice thing.
Yeah.
Because I think what it does is it the acclimation. Listen, no matter what, you're invited to a party, you get there and you see some friends. It's better, right? You go to a restaurant, you see some friends, you go over and say hi to them. It's just nice when you go someplace and you know some people. It just the transition is better, the orientation is better, and you feel like you have a friend there you can talk to initially, you can go to. It just I think it helps maximize the player early on.
Right. Speaking of Odafe Owe, just picked up his fifth-year option. Can you just talk about kind of what went into that decision and why that was kind of a slam dunk for you?
Yeah, again, he plays a really important position.
Yeah.
I think he's analytically looking at him, he's been a productive player and he's been a disruptive player for us. And we really do think that his best is yet to come. He's had some injuries. He's overcome some injuries. He's a tenacious guy. He played some really good football last year. And I just feel like, it was hard losing Patrick Queen, not picking up his option. It was a football decision. It really wasn't based on Patrick as a player as much as it just was allocation of resources at that position. It was a tough thing for me to make that decision. This one was more clear-cut just from the standpoint of plays a critical position. We are not allocating a ton of money to that position. Got a bunch of younger guys that play that position for the most part. And if he has a great year this year, which I believe he will, his value will be ×2 next year.
Yep.
Right.
So it just made a lot of sense with that room of players. You know, we don't have a Roquan Smith at the outside linebacker position that we're paying top of the market money to.
Yep.
So for us, it's like he's going to play this year at a good number. We believe he's going to produce really well, and that number next year is going to be worth it.
Yeah.
That's great. So then in the fourth round, you end up going with Devontae Walker. You talked about him, a little bit, and he's I mean, this guy was super productive, when he was on the field in college, and you like the body type that he brings. Just what do you feel like he's going to add to this receiver group, and can you get a guy in the fourth round who can come in and contribute right away?
Yeah, well, he's tall. He ran very fast, 4.3.
Yeah.
He's jumped over 42 inches, I think. Just an explosive guy, and I think with us, one of the things that we've been missing a little bit is that big, linear, outside field stretcher type of guy. Zay's fast, and he can be a vertical guy. Beta's fast. He's a vertical guy, but we see both those guys as also really, really good inside, full route tree, running, really being able to drop their weight inside, getting open, uncovering. So, having a guy like a Torrey Smith was for us, who can just run past people, catch the ball on vertical routes, draw pass interference penalties, force teams to play, too deep, cover 2 type coverages against us. I think it's going to really help us. He's a guy who can go get the ball. Again, I think a guy that we got to know, his story, his background, very compelling.
Yep.
A lot like Adisa in terms of overcoming adversities and things. And just made a lot of sense for us at that point in the draft. We've in some years you look at the fourth round and you're just not quite sure exactly what you want to do. And I think, this year, coming into the fourth round, as I'm stacking the board early in the morning on Saturday morning, it was like, okay, if we could ever get Tez or TJ with one of these picks, it'd be a slam dunk. Fortunately, we got both guys. Right. They were 2 of our highest rated players on the third day, and we were ecstatic to get those guys.
Yeah. You bring up the adversity that Tez has faced. I mean, the guy suffered a knee injury right before his college career started, ended up working at Bojangles to pay for his own rehab so he could take care of his grandmother. Then, of course, the eligibility issues from the NCAA. When you see somebody face that adversity and overcome it, come out the other side, once he got on the field in North Carolina, he was balling. Not just speaking to him, but in general for prospects, how big a deal is that when you see a guy that faced adversity and came out the other side?
Well, I think it's huge. When we look at it, and we have a lot of very skilled people that help me make these decisions. But when we look at the background of players, and whether it's Steve Claggett, who works with me, who really does a great job of looking at the backgrounds of players, or Dr. Trish, who works upstairs with me, helps with mental health and different things. And we see adversity that's been overcome. It's like a badge that these guys wear. It's a strength that these guys possess. Because playing here, playing in the NFL, coming into this situation where you might not be the very best anymore, that's challenging. Injuries, they're a thing. Some guys can't handle the fact that they've been hurt. So when you see a guy that's overcome something large in his life, some major obstacle, it tells me that the NFL is not going to be too big for them. They've already overcome something. They're hardened by that. It's like a scar that they wear proudly, and it's not going to be as challenging for them as it will be for a player who's had it pretty easy all along the way.
It's interesting to hear you talk about that. Around the draft time, like, it's always so much of a conversation. Character, personality, on field, off field, and like the person, and trying to evaluate that is like such a big piece of the equation. And you mentioned some of the folks who kind of help you in that evaluation process. You also have an analytics team that puts all sorts of work into, whether it's projecting who's going to be there. But I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, are you able to put science behind the personality piece of the equation in this evaluation process?
Well, that's a great question, and there's a lot of proprietary stuff in there that I probably wouldn't touch. But I will say that, yes, and we spent a lot of time doing that. When you talk about personality and you talk about makeup, you're talking about a lot of subjective things, and people can misread that. I mean, for me, as a bald white dude from New England, I might look at a player from rural Alabama totally different than an African American scout from Georgia. Mm-hmm. And so these biases that we have affect the way that we look at other people. Mm-hmm. The challenge is for us as evaluators to eliminate and to at least be aware of all these different biases. We want the evaluation process in general to be as objective as possible. How do we do that? We do that by talking about these biases. We do that by acknowledging these things, by eliminating noise, by creating objective measures and ways to measure different things like growth mindset, like pride, like attention to detail, leadership, team focus, and different things like that. I'm really proud of the guys, the scouts, the staff, whether it's, Steve Claggett, Dr. Trish. I mean, we even use, my assistant, our chief of staff, Jen Hoffman. She helps us with the interviews, and she conducts interviews all throughout the process via Zoom, where she's working with a group of people, interviewing prospects. They discuss the interviews afterwards. They evaluate the players, looking at different criteria with the idea that we can use this information in our predictive models to help us make decisions.
Well, I think that's one more reason also that it's great to have Ozzy still around, because, I mean, neither of you have much hair, but come from different backgrounds,
wow.
Right?
Yeah. And, we are very different in a lot of ways, but, working with Ozzy it's great. And I always tell people, so I was one of the first people that Ozzy ever hired back in 1996, and there's really no reason he should have hired me because we look totally different. Mm-hmm. He's in every Hall of Fame. I'm in no Hall of Fame. I went to a
Colby, you're not in the Colby Hall of Fame?
Nah, they don't even have a Hall of Fame. But I went to a small liberal arts college. He went to a massive football powerhouse. There was really nothing that we share except for passion for the game of football. But, and I always joke, and he said this, but some of his greatest strengths are probably my biggest weaknesses, and some of my greatest strengths are his biggest weaknesses. So it's always worked out really well. And we just became fast friends, even though we were so different from each other. And I look at that as a beautiful thing and something that is really in my life. When I think about some of the greatest joys, it's been my relationship with Ozzy. And, I've had people, not to digress, but I've had people say to me, isn't it weird having your boss work for you now? Mm-hmm. And I just say, no, it's beautiful. It's great. How many people could actually do that? I think it speaks to our relationship,
for sure,
that it works so seamlessly and it's been so easy. Because people would say to me, oh, that's crazy, man. Aren't you afraid he's going to be looking over your shoulder or questioning your moves, or, you're going to be afraid to make a move without his confirmation? And it's been fantastic, and it's been a blessing, and he continues to bring incredible value to the process and to help us be our very best.
That's cool.
Really cool.
Speaking of friends, I just back to Tez real quick. You talked about Lamar Jackson and having kind of an assignment for him to give you his favorite receivers. Was Devontae on his list of guys I'd like that guy?
We didn't. Lamar has opinions on different players and various things, but he and I did discuss the position a little bit, but Lamar wanted guys to work with. He didn't have specific names of players this year. He just was excited to get a bigger body X type of guy this year that we could develop. He's really happy. I think Lamar would say he's really happy with Flowers and Bateman. Tylen, obviously Nelson, guys like that. He was hoping to get a different type of body type with a different skill set outside, and I think we were able to supply that for him.
Mm-hmm. Another process question. You drafted younger players this year. Nate Wiggins, 20 years old.
Rosengarten's 21.
Rosengarten's 21. You've done it since you've been GM. Kyle Hamilton is a younger player. Patrick Queen was a younger player. Mm-hmm. is that a priority, and how does that factor into the evaluation?
Well, I mean, even Roquan, we traded for Roquan. And one of the appealing things for me, I mean, I hate to give up draft picks, but to get a Pro Bowl linebacker who's 25 or 26 when we got him.
Yeah.
I mean, so all the data that we use in our models suggests that younger players, if you have two players, go with the younger player. They have more upside. They develop more. And, you know, I think there's some, I was actually the other day, State of the Ravens, I was outside and hanging out with some suite holders, and I was talking to one gentleman who's a psychiatrist maybe, and he was talking about how if you're a male and you're, you know, under the age of 25, your brain hasn't really developed, which I know. I have two sons. So
you know from personal experience on that one?
From friends. I remember when I was 22 and 23.
I'm still waiting for my brain
some
to
of the
develop.
poor decisions that I
I'm
made.
40 now.
But, you know, so your brain is not really fully developed until you're 25.
Yeah.
And I believe that. And so, and I also know when you're younger, the data would suggest, and our modelers and, you know, Derek would say as well, younger players have a higher upside generally. So if you have two players in the same bucket as players, and one guy's 20 and one guy's 23, you have to take the 20-year-old because they have a much better chance of being better than the 23-year-old at some point in time. So that's by design. I mean, the models reflect that, the model scores. If you have two players that have exactly the same skill set, they play exactly the same position, one guy's 25, one guy's 20, the model's going to have the 20-year-old over the 25-year-old.
Right. I want to circle back real quick to the offensive line because I think a lot of people were kind of expecting us to take two, maybe even three offensive linemen. You know, we took Nick in the 7th round and center backup Tyler, maybe play some.
So we took two.
We took two.
So everybody expected it, and we did it, right?
Exactly.
Check it off the list.
So what's your question?
My question is, in the offensive line rebuild, like where do you feel like that stands now, and how much did your two guard picks from last year, were they really a part of kind of that rebuild that you saw coming?
Yeah, well, yes. And we're excited about those two guys. Andrew has really made remarkable strides coming off his knee injury. He looks fantastic. One of the strongest guys on the team. He's a really, really good player. Sala is a guy, very gifted, excellent athlete. His challenge was to get stronger in the offseason. I think he's doing that. We're excited about both those guys. We didn't really take those guys last year expecting them to play last year. So one of my jobs as GM is to have a crystal ball and to anticipate what the roster might look like a year from now, 2 years from now, et cetera. So those guys really kind of fit in, I think. You know, and also, you know, we've made some moves, and we signed Jones as an unrestricted free agent, guy that can play multiple spots, can play some guard, can play some tackle, has played both left tackle, right tackle, left guard, right guard. You know, we have some players like Ben Cleveland. We think he's up to the task this year. Pat McCary has proven that he can play all those different spots. We'll continue to kind of look at the field to see what's out there. With Samak, we got a guy that can play center and potentially guard as well. Excited about him. It's really, really important for us to have a backup, you know, center. Last year we had Mustafa. Weren't able to bring him back this year, but to have a guy that can back up and snap in a pinch, I think is good. So we did that. And like I always say with that position group, it's something that we are aware of. I think I'm happy. Would I've liked to have taken another guard maybe? Yeah, potentially. But that would have affected what we did in the draft. It would have affected other positions. And what I have always seen with need is your needs change daily. And that's why fundamentally, you know, it's almost like dollar cost averaging with the market and investing each month rather than trying to guess what the price of a stock is going to be. You're better off just in a lot of ways just taking need out of the equation because it changes so much and just drafting best available player at any given point. And at some point, that best available player becomes your need. And when that happens, you're well protected.
Right. Eric, you've said many times how much you love the draft. Like, it's just one of the things that is, you know, brings you great joy. And I think you've been in charge of it here for a long time. When you get to make the phone call now to these prospects and let them know they're being selected by the Ravens, is that maybe the best part of your job?
I mean, it is a great part of the job. I think that the best part of the job, though, is is seeing the impact that these players have on your team and your community long term. And when I look and see what a guy like Marshall Yanda brought to Baltimore, or Kyle Hamilton, guys like that, that's a powerful thing. When I go to the stadium and I see Lamar Jackson jerseys everywhere, Zay Flowers jerseys, I can't really express the joy that brings when our fans, when my children look up to these amazing players. When you see a guy like Brandon Stevens, that was a 3rd-round pick, transfer, change positions. When you see him become a lockdown corner last year like he was, I can't express the joy that brings. And when I see those guys in the community working with children, working with nonprofits, improving our city, that's what it's all about. So those calls are great. Those calls, that's the first step. And they're amazing. But what these players end up doing long term surpasses that for sure.
I have one more process question for you. We just got such great value, especially there in the 4th round, like you talked about with Tez and with TJ Tampa. When you get to those rounds, maybe it's the 3rd or the 4th, are you kind of looking for some dumb reason that other teams maybe did pass on this guy, right? Like for Tez, right? Like the guy dropped 2 balls all year and then went to Senior Bowl and dropped some balls or whatever, right? TJ Tampa was an awesome press corner, and he just ran a little bit slower 40-yard dash, right? Like, are you looking for of course you want to see players do well at the Senior Bowl. We put a lot of stock in the Senior Bowl, but he dropped balls and it's uncharacteristic. Yeah, that's value. Do you kind of look at those mid-round picks that way?
Well, you're looking for traits. You're looking for knowledge. You're looking for opportunity. You're looking for skills, the personality, the drivers. They got to play well on tape. You have to see that on tape. You have to see production. We've had a lot of success in the past with players. I can just give you 2 names off the top: Isaiah Likely, Kyle Hamilton, guys that didn't necessarily ace the workouts. Kyle didn't run super fast. Isaiah didn't run super fast. Now, in both cases, we were able to use advanced analytics, data, modeling. Yeah, we knew that players were faster than those times, and I think that the same holds true. With TJ, we know he's a faster player, and so from that standpoint, I think. We didn't see a lot of risk with him. The way that he plays, his mentality, his coverability, his length. Unusual to have a corner with that type of arm length and just size. We think he's a prototypical press corner type of guy. Love his skill set. And, as I said, player that we would have been very comfortable taking on the second day had we not already drafted a corner.
Right.
At that point in the second round, in the 4th round, it would have been irresponsible for us not to take him when he was still there.
You had Mike Elias in the draft from Thursday night, right? From the Orioles. Was that kind of cool to have him being part of that? I mean, obviously not part of the process, but just kind of watching on. And you've gone in and watched their draft before too, right?
You drafted Jackson Holiday, right?
Yeah, I was there for that. I didn't draft. But that was one of the highlights of my career, was being there, that draft, and just watching that process and getting a chance to meet those guys. I mean, a little known fact, Mike was a pitcher at Yale, and a pretty good pitcher with a background. And so we had him evaluate all the quarterbacks this year.
Oh, no way.
Yeah. We had him evaluate all the quarterbacks, and he was looking at, throwing motion and, can the guy drop down and do all these different things with arm mechanics and all that kind of stuff. And he came out of it saying, I think Devin Leary is the best guy. And so the fact that Mike Elias and T, both kind of thought that, for me, was validation that, hey, we might be onto something here.
That's cool. Yeah, I mean, Leary's arm that's a special arm.
Yeah.
I have a feeling here.
Wait,
I have a feeling.
No, he's coming again.
He's too gullible.
I got you guys again.
Listen, I was onto it. I was onto it.
I almost got to the end without getting duped.
Listen, just as context here, last year when Eric was on the podcast after drafting Tavius Robinson, he told us a whole story just like that, came up with it on the spot about how he was a hockey player.
Hockey goalie,
and that's how he came onto the scene from Jerry Rossberg in Canada, when he was a kid. And before we started, we said, "Are you going to have any stories like that?" Mink brought it up.
High alert.
We were ready for it, but still, you bought a hook, line, sinker.
He waited till the end.
Mike Elias.
My defenses were down.
It just came to me too all of a sudden. It just came off the top.
That's why you're a dangerous man around draft time, because if you can come up with those stories here that quick, I don't know what other stories you're telling.
That's why my college buddies will call me a sociopath every now and then.
I don't even want to know what stories you tell other GMs around the league.
Well, this was very fun. Thank you very much for ending it on a low note for me. But thanks a lot, Eric. Appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. Appreciate it. Appreciate it.
Welcome back into the Lounge Podcast. We're coming to you from the SeatGeek studio. We want to give a shout out to our friends at DraftKings Sportsbook. They are an official sports betting partner of the Baltimore Ravens. They've got a limited time offer running that you don't want to miss. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app today. Use the promo code FLOCK. If you're a new user, you can get a deposit bonus up to $1,000. Again, the promo code is FLOCK only at DraftKings Sportsbook. For help, visit mdgamblinghelp.org or call 1-800-GAMBLER. You need to be at least 21 years or older to play and physically present in Maryland. So obviously great stuff from Eric. Highlight being that he fools you again. I was shocked. I could feel you buying it, and I was like, he's not falling for it. Oh, he is falling. He is falling for it.
I mean, I'm a very gullible person. I'm not gonna lie.
You see the best in people.
I do. And like the journalist in me is like, oh, this is sick. I'm just eating this up. I'm just eating that story up, and then just the rug pulled out from underneath.
Well, that's I remember a journalism professor somewhere along the lines. Script school journalism, a little more hard-hitting journalism. But
I'm sorry, Maryland. There's you again.
But the quote was "trust but verify." And you trust, never verify.
No, I was going to verify. I was going to go to my sources and check on this.
Yeah.
Anyway, but really good stuff.
It was great. I mean, I love hearing the process stuff from him. I think it's really interesting hearing just how thoughtful. I think that Ravens fans will see in watching or listening to the interview just how thoughtful and procedural and creative Eric is in terms of the entire operation. Mm-hmm. And I think that he gives us a glimpse when he sits down and does his interview with us every year. And I hope that that's something that fans took away from this conversation.
Yeah, and some interesting little tidbits, that they were like seriously considering taking TJ Tampa there in the third round. And kind of a little more details behind what went into the Rosengarten pick and almost not getting their guy. So thank you, Chiefs, for backing out of that trade. And just interesting. And the big takeaway, I helped us get Roger Rosengarten. So you're welcome, everybody. When Rosengarten's a Pro Bowler, he's a stud. You're welcome. Yeah, that was all my mock drafts.
Well,
thank you, Cole Jackson. I blame Cole. Cole put a lot of smoke around Kingsley,
and you were just you. That was really what your goal was. That's
exactly.
That's what
I'm a team player.
Sell.
Look, I'm a team player.
I will say, I had to keep myself. I should have done it, but I should have asked him the Rasheen Ali question. Yeah, because that was my guy.
That was big of you to leave that out.
I didn't want to rub it in. I had enough of that, so I just get my shot in there on that right now. But really enjoy the conversation with Eric. Great stuff from him, and it's exciting to be able to sit down and talk with him and just get a little bit more perspective on the draft. And the rookies are here. They're in the building. Rookie minicamp is this weekend, so we're going to get a first chance to kind of see these guys in the building, and they're going to take the field. It's always a fun time for everybody here when the rookies come in, and it's just a kind of a jolt of energy. So as always, you can email us at thelounge@ravens.nfl.net.
We're going to try to get some of the rookies on the pod here. Yeah. So stay tuned.
We're going to work on that. So stay tuned for that coming up soon. So you can email us. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching, and we will talk with you again soon.